You ever have that moment when something just feels off? You can't explain it yet, no evidence, no solid reason, just a gut pull that tells you something's changed. That's how it started with Megan. We'd been married 8 years. No kids, not for lack of trying, just never worked out, and honestly, I'd stopped pushing after a while. Megan was still the girl I fell for back in college. Warm, quick with a laugh, smart, kind of reserved in public but lit up when we were alone. I was 36, she was 34, we'd built a good life. Or so I thought. Then my younger brother, Darren, came to stay with us for a bit. He was 28, kind of a drifter type, never stayed anywhere long. He'd been living out west, doing odd jobs, posting half-baked motivational content on Instagram, chasing whatever version of success he thought looked best on camera. But after his last startup fell apart, he asked if he could crash at our place for a few weeks. Megan didn't even hesitate. Of course, she said. He's your brother. I didn't see the problem either at first. We'd always been close. Darren was the kind of guy people liked right away. He had charm, reckless charm, the kind that got him into rooms and into trouble in equal measure. Megan used to call him, your wild little twin, because we did look alike, even if we couldn't be more different inside. The first week, everything felt fine. Darren helped out around the house. Cooked, even. Megan was happy to have someone to talk to while I worked long hours. I'm in logistics, and our quarter-end numbers were brutal. I barely saw her some nights. She said Darren kept her company, that it was nice having someone around who wasn't buried in spreadsheets. I didn't think twice. But then one weekend I had to fly out to Houston for a supplier audit. I was only gone 2 nights. When I got back, something in the house felt different. I don't know how else to describe it. Just off. Megan seemed a little jumpier, a little quieter. Darren barely looked me in the eye. They said they went out to the movies. Said they ordered Chinese and binge-watched some show we all liked. But Megan didn't kiss me like she usually did when I got home. Her hug was light, polite, like I was someone else's husband. The next morning, I found Darren's hoodie on the back of the couch, and when I picked it up to toss it in the laundry, a bracelet fell out of the pocket. It was Megan's. I knew it was hers because I bought it for our 3rd anniversary, silver, custom engraved. She hadn't worn it in months. I asked her about it. She said, "Oh, I must have left it on the counter. Maybe he picked it up by accident." But her voice cracked a little when she said it. It was small, could have meant nothing. But that was the first time I knew something had changed. I just didn't know how bad it really was yet. I started noticing little things after that weekend. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. I didn't want to be that guy, suspicious, controlling, bitter. I'd always prided myself on being the calm one, the guy who didn't jump to conclusions. But something was happening, and whether I wanted to see it or not, it was there. Quiet, creeping. Darren stopped helping around the house. He was suddenly always out, gym, errands, meeting up with old friends. I never saw these friends. Never heard their names. But I wanted to believe him. He was my brother. Megan, meanwhile, was either too quiet or too sweet. There was no in-between. One night she'd barely talk to me, say she was tired. The next day she'd be overly affectionate, making my favorite meal, offering back rubs, acting like everything was perfect. It was jarring. It didn't feel like her. And then there were the late-night laughs. I'd hear them from the guest room, Darren's room. Megan giggling. Once I came downstairs around midnight because I couldn't sleep, and I saw the glow of the TV under the door. I knocked. The laughter stopped. A few seconds later, the door opened. Megan stepped out, wrapped in a blanket like she'd been cold, her face a little flushed. She smiled like nothing was weird and said, "We were just watching some old comedy stuff." Couldn't sleep. I nodded, said, "Cool," and went back upstairs. But inside, something twisted. The next day I checked the guest room while Darren was out. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Some kind of proof? A bra? An earring? I didn't find anything. What I did find was Megan's favorite mug sitting on his nightstand. She never brought that mug out of the kitchen. It was one of those sentimental ones, said, "Coffee first, talk later." A little lipstick smudge on the rim. That night, I asked her directly, "Do you and Darren hang out a lot when I'm not here?" She gave me a weird look. "What kind of question is that?" "I mean, I don't know. Just feels like you two are really close lately. "We're just being friendly," she said. Then she added, "He's your brother. You're acting like that's a problem." I didn't say anything else. But she knew I wasn't convinced. That weekend, I told Darren I thought it was time he moved out. Gave him a week to figure things out. He didn't argue. He just looked at me for a long time and said, "All right. If that's what you want, bro." Bro. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Megan was cold to me that night. Distant again. She barely looked at me during dinner. Went to bed early. Said she had a headache. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spin. Her back turned to me, just like it had been for weeks now. I think that was the moment I admitted it to myself. Something happened between them. I didn't have the how or when. But I finally had the what. A few days after I told Darren to leave, he packed his things and left without a word. No goodbye, no handshake, not even a, "Thanks for letting me stay." Megan didn't say much either. She just stayed upstairs the whole time, didn't help, didn't ask where he was going. When the front door finally shut behind him, I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt nothing. That silence between Megan and me, it didn't go away when he left. If anything, it got worse. We were two strangers living in the same house, pretending to be fine. But the tension was thick, like we were both waiting for something to explode. A few nights later, I was in the garage looking for a wrench when I noticed Darren's old duffel bag shoved under the workbench. He must have forgotten it. For a second, I thought about texting him. But something told me to look inside first. The bag was mostly junk: gym shorts, a beat-up pair of headphones, a couple of crumpled t-shirts. But then I found the notebook. It was one of those small black journals, the kind you'd carry in a pocket. He always scribbled in those, called them his brain dumps. I wish I hadn't opened it. I really wish I hadn't turned to the middle pages. There were dates, names, half-written thoughts, lists. I flipped to one that stopped me cold. It just said, M. Tightest I've ever had. Wild, risky. Guilt is the best spice. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. M. Megan. I kept reading. I don't know why. Some part of me needed the pain to be real. Needed the denial to die. There was more. She said she dreams about me. Says I make her feel alive again. We almost got caught last Thursday. He was downstairs. We didn't care. We both know it's wrong. That's what makes it hot. He doesn't touch her like I do. She told me that. I dropped the notebook. My hands were shaking. I leaned over the workbench, trying to steady my breath, but the room was spinning. My younger brother, my own blood, had been sleeping with my wife. In my house, under my roof, while I worked late, while I cooked dinner, while I trusted them both. I don't know how long I stood there. I felt like something inside me broke, not loud like glass shattering, but quiet. A slow tear, something permanent. When I finally walked back inside, Megan was on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. I just stared at her. She didn't look up, and in that moment, I realized something else. She wasn't even sorry. Not because I hadn't said anything, but because, deep down, I think she thought I'd never find out. Like maybe she thought I was too soft, too loyal, too blind, and maybe I had been. But not anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. Not a minute. I lay in the dark beside Megan, listening to her breathe, calm, steady, like the world hadn't changed. Like she hadn't destroyed our marriage and torn apart the last bit of family I had left. And the worst part? She never flinched, never tossed, never turned. I think she knew I knew. The next morning, I left before she woke up. I couldn't sit across from her at the kitchen table pretending eggs and toast were going to fix this. I drove around for hours. Just thinking. Rage boiled up every few minutes, but it wasn't wild or uncontrollable. It was cold, focused. I wasn't some teenager ready to blow up my whole life just to scream. I wanted her to feel this. Not just regret it, feel it. She didn't deserve a fight. She didn't deserve an explanation. She deserved to lose everything she took for granted. So I started planning. First, I called a lawyer, a friend of mine from college, Nathan. Good guy, no drama. I told him I had reason to believe my wife had an affair with my own brother and that I wanted to explore my options quietly. He didn't ask for details. Just gave me a checklist and told me to start gathering everything: bank records, shared assets, passwords, insurance, retirement, all of it. Don't confront her yet, he said. Not until you're in position. You only get one shot at catching someone off guard. That was the advice I needed. Step 2 was tech. I work in logistics, so I'm no stranger to tracking tools. I installed a remote backup system on our shared devices. Pulled deleted texts. Got access to her iCloud. Set up a clone of her email that auto-forwarded everything to a private address she didn't know existed. Within 2 days, I had enough. Messages between her and Darren. Photos. Voice memos. Stuff I wish I could unsee. But it helped kill the last sliver of me that might have ever taken her back. Turns out the affair started while I was in Chicago for a week-long conference. Darren was supposed to be staying with his old bandmate in Austin. He never left town. Megan let him stay, told me it was just for a night. He stayed for 4, and after that, it snowballed. At one point, she texted him, "If he ever finds out, we're dead. But I don't even care anymore. I feel like you're the only real thing in my life." That one hurt, not because she said it, but because part of me remembered when she used to say things like that to me. But the hurt didn't last long. By then, I was already building my exit. I moved half our savings to a separate account, nothing illegal, just the portion legally in my name. I paused all joint credit cards, set up mail forwarding, booked a storage unit across town and started boxing up my essentials when she wasn't home. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to disappear from her life like she never existed in mine. And then, when the moment was right, I'd burn the illusion she'd built around herself. Not just for me, but for everyone she lied to. I never pictured revenge as something hair on fire loud. I didn't want a scene in a bar or a smashed windshield. I wanted the thing she'd built, the comfortable, entitled life, to dissolve in the slow, honest way she should have felt when she stabbed us both in the back. I wanted consequences that lasted longer than a week of humiliation. So I played the long game. First, timing. I called Nathan again and told him I was ready. He told me to make sure everything was in order before we moved. The journal, the text threads, the photos, the time-stamped backups. He said the court liked an organized narrative, not rage, not melodrama, but a clear demonstration of pattern and intent. I printed everything. I labeled folders. I made copies and sent them to 2 places. Nathan's secure office and a safety deposit box in my name. Then I used the other tool I'd been building quietly for days, financial leverage. Megan and I had a joint account we used for household bills, mortgage, and vacations. She'd taken to withdrawing cash in little chunks, grocery money, she'd say. Darren had been less careful, he'd used her card a couple times. Nathan told me that if she'd been dissipating marital assets to support an affair, hotels, gifts, cash withdrawals, we could ask the court to account for that and potentially get those sums back in the division. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was something. I moved the legal minimum into my separate account, no theft. Everything I moved was mine, and, crucially, Nathan filed a motion asking the court for a temporary order to preserve joint assets while the suit progressed. When the temporary order hit the judge's desk 2 days later, it did something I hadn't expected. It scared her. The bank froze the account for a short period. Joint cards were limited. For the first time since I found the notebook, she noticed the consequences of living like there were no limits. Next was the divorce filing itself. I scheduled it for a Tuesday morning and made sure Nathan delivered the petition when she was at work. I didn't want a dramatic scene in the kitchen. I wanted the legal machinery to start grinding while she still had her morning coffee. The papers listed adultery, cited evidence of dissipation of assets, and asked for temporary exclusive possession of the house while things settled. I asked for the court to grant temporary custody of our dog, stupid sounding, but it mattered. Pets were mine from the day she brought him home. He curled into my lap whenever I read. It was small, but it was mine. When she walked in the door that night and saw the envelope on the counter, she laughed at first. Then she read. The laugh died. She called Darren. He ignored the call. I didn't stalk her reaction. I made a list instead. Family, friends, employer. I knew this was cold, but part of what hurt was how many people she'd lied to them, too. I thought about who would need to know. Her mother, her best friend, her boss. But I also knew there was a line I didn't want to cross. No blackmail, no threats, no stalking. This was going to be truth, not vengeance dressed as cruelty. I started with her mother. I left a voicemail that said plainly, "I need you to know something important about Megan before you hear it from someone else." I was honest, short, and I told the truth. It fractured the version of Megan her mother had been told for years. Her mother called, screamed, then cried. Family visits stopped, her closest friends backed away over the next 2 weeks. Invitations dried up, people pick a side in moments like that, and most chose the easier reality, distance. Then there was her job. I uploaded a redacted, spelled out timeline to Nathan's secure server and asked him whether I should show it to her HR or her managing partner. He told me bluntly, "If you do this, it becomes a workplace matter only if it affects their job performance or violates company policy." The company's code of conduct covered misuse of corporate credit cards and undisclosed relationships with colleagues. Darren had worked on several unpaid consulting gigs for one of her clients, and there were receipts. Nathan advised me to give the company the facts and let them do what they had to do. I sent an email to HR with copies of relevant messages that involved company resources in personal transactions. They launched an internal review. I watched it all happen like a man watching a tide pull out. Not because I delighted in her suffering, I didn't. I felt hollow and steady. I felt like a surgeon excising a tumor. Megan's phone calls reduced. Her lunch with friends was cancelled more often. Her boss stopped returning texts with the easy banter he used to send. People who'd once assumed she was the sane center of our little social world started asking questions. And finally, the legal part closed in. The judge granted a temporary order to prevented Megan from transferring any major assets and gave me exclusive use of the house for the time being. It wasn't permanent, but it stopped her from cleaning out accounts or selling things off in a panicked attempt to hold on to a fantasy. The court also ordered a forensic accounting of joint expenditures over the past year. When the accountant found hotel stays and cash withdrawals keyed to the timeline of the affair, Nathan filed an amended petition asking the court to compensate the marital estate for those sums. The look on her face when she read that motion, when she saw itemized charges with dates and addresses she'd thought were secret, was the closest thing to satisfaction I felt. Not because I wanted to watch her fall, but because she'd always expected there to be no cost. She'd believed some version of invulnerability, and for the first time she saw the bill. There were people who called me cold. There were people who told me I should have left silently, that vengeance eats you. Maybe they were right, maybe some nights it did. But there was one more thing I needed to do, something I saved for last because it would sting in the place where betrayal had started. My brother. Darren's life keeps coming up whenever I talk to people I grew up with, like a phantom limb. He'd been a free agent for years, living by charm and hustle. He called me the night my lawyer filed the motion. He asked if I could fix it. I didn't answer. Instead, the next day, I drove to the small house where he'd been staying and sat on the porch until he came out. He looked tired, a little thinner. He tried to joke about it. I didn't laugh. I handed him the duffel bag he'd left under the workbench months ago, the one with his threadbare shirts and the black notebook. And I handed him the rest. A one-way bus ticket, cash enough for a month, and a list of shelters and temp jobs in places he could start over. I told him, flat, "You leave. You don't come back. Not to this town. Not to my house. Not to my family." He tried to say something. I said, "You don't get to apologize with lies. You don't get to patch this up on weekends. This is what it costs." He packed. He walked out. I didn't shout. I didn't slam doors. I didn't throw anything. I watched the back of him until he was gone down the street. When the door shut behind him, the house felt quieter. Lighter. Not fixed. Not healed. But different, like a wound that had finally been cleaned. I'd taken the legal path. I'd alerted the people who mattered. I'd used proof and patience instead of fury. It wasn't poetic. It was practical. But it made her lose the things she'd been counting on: security, access, the neat little life where consequences never caught up. That was the point. Megan moved out 2 weeks after the court granted me temporary possession of the house. She didn't fight it, not anymore. By then, she was worn down, not from guilt, but from consequences. Losing control doesn't sit well with people like her. She'd built her identity around having options, around always being one step ahead. But now the steps were catching up. She left in a U-Haul, her face blank as she carried out the boxes she had once insisted were ours. Clothes. A couple of kitchen appliances she claimed were gifted to her. Her mirror from the bedroom. She didn't take much, mostly the things that still let her feel like she had control. I watched from the porch. Didn't offer to help. Didn't say goodbye. When she drove away, I didn't feel triumph. I felt empty. But sometimes, emptiness is better than rot. A week later, Nathan called. The forensic accountant had finished the report. He said it was more damning than he expected. The affair hadn't just been emotional or physical. Megan had spent nearly $9,200 over 6 months, hotels, flights for Darren, even payments toward a used car in his name. The paper trail was solid. Every time she said she was taking a break, or visiting a friend, she was covering for another weekend with him. This wasn't impulsive, it was planned. Nathan filed a new petition for wasteful dissipation of marital assets, asking the court to award me a disproportionate share of the final division, essentially, a bigger cut of what was left. I didn't care about the money in the beginning. But the more I saw what she was willing to burn to feed that affair, the more I understood something simple. She would have left me with nothing, emotionally, financially, even my dignity, if she thought I'd never find out. That's what made me push forward. And the fallout kept going. Her employer called her in for a closed-door meeting after they completed their internal review. Apparently, several of the consulting invoices Darren submitted had been signed off by Megan, with zero oversight. It wasn't technically illegal, but it violated company policy. They offered her a choice: resign quietly or face a formal ethics hearing. She resigned. Her LinkedIn disappeared a few days later. That night, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was her. "You happy now?" That was all she wrote. I stared at it for a minute. Then I deleted it. No reply. What surprised me most wasn't that Megan lost her job or that Darren disappeared again. It was how quietly the people around us adjusted. Friends I thought we shared mostly stuck with me. I didn't expect that. I assumed there'd be a lot of, "we don't take sides," but I think the way I handled things, slow, deliberate, without drama, made people see me differently. I wasn't the guy who got cheated on. I was the guy who stood still while the house burned and walked out with the deed. One night, a friend of mine, Matt, said something I won't forget. "You didn't just take everything from her, man. You took the illusion that she was smarter than you. That's what really broke her." I didn't say anything. But he wasn't wrong. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the money. It was the fact that, for once, she couldn't manipulate the outcome. She couldn't charm her way out. Couldn't cry her way back in. I gave her nothing. And for someone like her, nothing is the worst kind of punishment. And now? Now the paperwork is almost final. I'll keep the house, the dog, most of the joint savings. Her share of retirement took a hit because of the waste claim. Nathan says we should be signed and sealed within 30 days. She called twice since the job loss. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She'd already heard what silence sounded like when it's backed by consequences. The final court date came and went like a dentist appointment. Just a few signatures, some paperwork, and the judge's nod of acknowledgement. Then it was done. No big dramatic scene. No last-minute speech. Just the legal end of what used to be a marriage. I walked out of that courtroom into a quiet fall afternoon. Cool breeze, leaves scraping across the sidewalk. Funny thing was, I didn't feel free. I didn't feel powerful or vindicated or even angry anymore. I felt tired. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. People always assume you want revenge to feel like a victory. That's not what this was. This was a war one didn't start. I didn't want to fight it, but I did. Not because I wanted to win, but because she left me no other option. She cheated. She lied. She gambled with my trust and used my brother like some twisted weapon. And when it came crashing down, she acted shocked that I didn't just quietly absorb the damage. But I didn't absorb it. I moved through it. That's the difference. I didn't get everything back. You never really do. I lost time. I lost family. I lost part of myself I'll probably never see again. The part that trusted without hesitation, that believed love was enough. But I also gained something. I gained clarity. I gained peace. Megan moved out of state a few weeks after the divorce finalized. I heard from a mutual friend that she's living in a small apartment and trying to freelance while figuring things out. Apparently Darren cut her off too, something about not wanting to be dragged down in the drama anymore. No surprise there, he was never going to stay. That was the cruel irony. She threw away a steady life, a loyal husband, and a future for someone who never really wanted to build anything. Darren was the kind of person who liked the chase more than the catch. And when it got real, he bailed, like always. I don't feel bad for her. I don't feel anything at all. As for me, I kept the house. Kept the dog. Kept the silence. And slowly, I started building again. Nothing crazy. No rebound relationship. No dramatic, new chapter, nonsense. Just small things. I fixed the squeaky fence gate. Painted the guest room. I started reading again. Actual books, not just work emails and court filings. I called my mom more. I started being present in my own life, instead of just enduring it. Some nights I sit on the back deck with a drink in my hand and think about all the things I could have done differently. All the signs I ignored. The trust I gave too easily. The forgiveness I wanted to offer even when I shouldn't have. But you can't go back. And maybe that's the point. You survive something like this by becoming someone stronger, not colder, just clearer. You stop apologizing for seeing what's right in front of you. You stop carrying people who would drop you in a heartbeat. You learn that peace doesn't come from payback. It comes from letting go. So no, I didn't win. I just survived. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough.